Hello, I'm Richard Rose and I'm the Professor of Inclusive Education at the University of Northampton. And for the last 14 years I've been working regularly with colleagues in India, and in particular over the last 4 years have helped to develop an MA programme in inclusive education which is based in Bangalore in Karnataka state. There are a number of important principles which we've learned whilst developing this course, and I think the most important one is to spend time actually on the development, looking to see exactly what the needs are and making sure that we don't simply impose a Western view of inclusion and Western teaching approaches on an Indian teacher population. So working with colleagues, I think respectfully as equal partners, is a critical part of the work that we've actually done there. There are a number of challenges that we face actually working with teachers. The first is, I think there's still a huge emphasis upon a medical deficit model. We still have teachers who ask, how should I teach an autistic child? Or what do I do about a child with Down syndrome in my class? And we've tried to move away from that by looking at the principles of pedagogy and teaching and issues of classroom management. For us, this has been very interesting because many of the schools we work in are very different from those we know in a Western context. Some of the government schools, for instance, that we work with in Bangalore and elsewhere in India, Chennai for instance, will have classes of 60 or more children and very few resources. So to actually expect them to use the kind of approaches that we use in England is very, very demanding and in some cases not realistic. So we've spent a lot of time in these schools collecting evidence of good practice that exists already and building on that and seeing where teachers have had success with children from marginalised groups, this has worked, and helping to develop that further and put some structure onto the work within the schools. I think at the moment there are enormous issues for many of these teachers in India. We have the Right to Free and Compulsory Education Act, the RTE, in India, which is a huge step forward with a recognition that there are still huge numbers of children not getting access to education. But the way it's being interpreted is quite problematic. I think many schools have been frightened by the imposition, as they see it, of children coming into their schools without being adequately prepared. I also think as there are an increasing middle class population in India who have become more wealthy and have become more distant from those at the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, there have been increasing concerns that the children from the slum areas, for instance, those with disabilities, those from scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, are being brought into school and will impact upon the learning of others. To some extent we've seen this of course in Western education systems, but I think it's intensified by some of the contextual issues and the traditions and traditional belief systems within India. So there is an enormous task to do in supporting teachers. But I would emphasise that this is about supporting teachers and utilising their skills, making them the leaders in this process and not imposing our own views of the way that we should be working to develop inclusive schools. It's going to take a long time, undoubtedly, but in my experience there is absolutely no shortage of enthusiasm and no lack of commitment on the part of teachers to ensure that Indian schools do become much more inclusive in the future.